All right, let's dive into something huge happening in India's economy, a total rewrite of its labor laws. I mean, the source material we're looking at calls this the biggest reform since the country's independence. We're talking about moving from this really complex, tangled mess of old rules to a brand new, streamlined system. So the big question is, what does this actually mean for hundreds of millions of people?
Okay, just to get a sense of the scale we're talking about, look at this number. 500 million. That's 500 million workers across India. We're not talking about some minor policy tweak here. This is a reform that's designed to touch a workforce bigger than the entire population of the US and Russia combined. It's just massive.
And right here, this is the heart of the problem that this whole reform is trying to fix. You see, for decades, a massive 90% of India's workforce has been in what's called the unorganized sector. What does that mean? Well, it means they've basically been outside the system, No access to fundamental social security like pensions or health benefits. And that is the gap these new codes are trying to close. So you might be asking, why was such a massive change even needed? Well, that brings us to the old system, which honestly can only be described as a tangled mess of laws that was long overdue for a rethink. The source material we're drawing from describes the old system perfectly, a web of multiple labor legislations. It wasn't just one or two old laws. It was a maze of regulations. And get this, some of them dated all the way back to the British Raj. This complexity just created so much confusion and made following the rules a total nightmare for everybody, employers and employees alike. And this slide just lays out the transformation so perfectly. On the left, you've got the old way, buried in paperwork, needing all these different registrations, even forcing workers to fill out 4 different forms just to get a single benefit. Crazy, right? Now look at the new vision on the right. It's all about simplicity. 4 codes, 1 registration, 1 license, 1 return. The whole point is to just slice right through all that red tape.
So, how in the world did they tackle this level of complexity? Well, the heart of the whole transformation is this idea of consolidation, taking dozens and dozens of separate, often overlapping laws and just boiling them down into a clear, manageable framework.
But, this was not an overnight change. Far from it. The idea to simplify all these laws was first officially recommended way, way back in 2002. Then, as you can see from this timeline, it just kind of sat there in discussions for over a decade. It wasn't until the Shram FJAT scheme was launched in 2014 that the momentum really started to build, finally leading to Parliament passing these 4 new codes in 2020. So yeah, this reform was nearly 20 years in the making. And this table gives us a really crystal clear picture of that consolidation. You can see exactly how 29 different central labor laws were neatly grouped together. I mean, look at this. 13 separate laws just on workplace safety are now all under one single roof, the Occupational Safety Code. It's a fantastic example of that drive for simplification and clarity. Okay, so we've covered the why and the how. Now let's get into the really interesting part, the what. What do these new codes actually change for the average worker on the ground? First up, let's talk about the Code on Wages. Its main goal is pretty straightforward, to make sure every single worker has wage security. And honestly, this is a potential game changer. For the very first time, the right to a minimum wage becomes universal. That covers all 500 million workers, and crucially, it brings that huge 90% from the unorganized sector officially into the fold. The code also says, hey, equal pay for equal work, regardless of gender. And it introduces a national floor wage to stop states from going below a certain baseline. That's a big step toward tackling regional inequality. All right, next up, we have the Code on Social Security. And this one is all about expanding that essential safety net to more people than ever before. So the source material highlights some really key expansions here. Medical benefits are now set to cover every single district in the country. Pension benefits are extended to everyone. And this is a big one for the modern economy. For the first time, it brings gig and platform workers, like delivery drivers or freelance coders, into the Social Security system. A national database and a universal account number are also meant to make all these benefits portable, so they follow you from job to job. Okay, the third code zeroes in on the work environment itself. The whole idea is to make it safer and more equitable for everyone. So this code puts several new rights into law. Some of them seem really basic, but they're absolutely fundamental, like getting a mandatory appointment letter for every job, or a free annual health checkup that your employer has to provide.
It also modernizes the rules, allowing women to work night shifts, but, and this is key, only with their consent and with guaranteed safety measures in place. It also creates these crucial new protections for interstate migrant workers, making sure their benefits can move with them as they move for work. Oh, and paid maternity leave is increased from 12 to 26 weeks. That's a huge deal. So, there's a really clear focus on worker rights, right? But according to the source material, this is a dual philosophy. These reforms are designed not just to empower workers, but also to improve the whole environment for businesses to grow and thrive. And this quote from the Prime Minister really captures that philosophy. The idea is that the triumph of labor, or Shramif Jayate, isn't some obstacle to growth, but actually an essential ingredient for growth. It's about placing the dignity and value of labor right up there on the same level as truth itself in the journey of the nation's development. And that brings us to the other side of the coin, making it easier to do business in India. The core idea here is that cutting through all that legal red tape doesn't just help workers. It helps create a simpler, clearer system that benefits everybody. This slide shows one of the most significant mindset shifts in the whole reform. You see, the old system was often called the Inspector Raj, which is a term that really suggests a confrontational, bureaucratic process that was just ripe for harassment. The new mandate totally reframes this role. The inspector becomes an inspector cum facilitator, so someone who's there to advise and guide, not just to punish. And this whole shift is backed by a transparent, web-based inspection system to make sure there's more accountability. So, when you put all of this together, what's the big takeaway? Well, the goal described in the source material is nothing less than fundamentally redefining the relationship between employers and employees for a new era. And this chart boils it all down to 3 key pillars. First, simplification. Taking that tangled web of 29 laws and turning it into just 4 clear codes. Second, universalization. Extending basic rights like minimum wages and Social Security to everyone, especially that huge 90% in the unorganized sector. And third, digitization. Using technology to make everything from registration to inspections to benefit delivery way more efficient and transparent. And this final quote from the source really captures the aspirational vision behind it all. It's about moving away from a mindset of conflict and toward one of collaboration. It suggests that when employers and employees can see themselves as having a common purpose, like a family, then the journey of development just can't be stopped by anyone. So the ambition here is incredibly clear: to forge a modern labor framework that can simultaneously protect workers and power economic growth. The laws are now on the books, but of course, their real-world impact is what everyone is going to be watching. So is this truly a new code for a new India? I guess that's the question that only time will answer.